You're listening to Travel Tales with Virgil.
Hello, my name is Virgil O'Keefe and you're very welcome to the podcast. I'm delighted to say that the first episode of Season 3 comes out next Tuesday with a great interview with that comedy legend Reginald D Hunter, and then every Tuesday for the rest of the year. But before that, we have a special bonus episode today with the best-selling debut novelist Louise Nealon, which was recorded live in the amazing new Junction Dome during the Clonmel Junction Festival in July. Louise Nealon chats about her experiences in the last year, from getting an agent to writing her book Snowflake to getting it published and then going straight to #1 in the Irish bestseller charts. This interview will be of interest to anyone who loves writing as we delve into the writing process, and Louise tells us what inspirations fuel her creativity. I have some amazing guests recorded for Season 3 and I can't wait to share them with you every Tuesday. I'd ask you to subscribe or follow the podcast, whatever platform you use to get your podcasts, and you will be the first to get a new episode every week. So now let's go to my interview with Louise and see you next week for the start of Season 3. I'm delighted to say that my guest today is author Louise Nealon, who just had the most amazing year. From getting a book deal to having the film and TV rights snapped up by Element Pictures to publishing her debut novel Snowflake, which then went straight to #1 in the bestseller charts, and all in 1 year. Louise, you're very welcome to the podcast.
Oh, thanks a million, Virgil. Thanks for having me. It's great to be here in real life.
Exactly. The last time I talked to you was over Zoom with our first podcast, and so it's lovely to actually be here in this lovely venue, isn't it?
Gorgeous.
How does it feel to be getting out and about?
Really weird, but in a lovely way. I came down to Clonmel yesterday and did a few events around I did the People event in yesterday, and it was like a kind of like a walking tour of the place, but there was like actors giving you notes and stuff, and it was just gorgeous. And I actually got really emotional at the end of it. It was like being in a play but walking about, and you're the only audience member, so it was really, really nice. And the dome's amazing as well. I love Clonmel. It's been really welcoming.
Exactly. Well, that's great to hear. It's your first time, is it, Clonmel?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Exactly. Great excuse to get here. So I want to bring you back to March last year when you got a phone call from your agent, Marion, and it was to tell you that you had a book deal, and also in the same week you got a TV and film rights deal. So that was an amazing week, wasn't it?
Yeah, I'm still processing it, to be honest. So I went for, we were meant to be going for a walk, myself and my sister, and I'd handed the manuscript of the novel in to Marion, and she said that she had it out in submission. I didn't know what that meant. So I was expecting something, but not as quickly, or the manuscript was finished very quickly in the end, and I submitted it, and then she rang me. We were on the way home from Hope after picking up Catherine's boyfriend from the airport. This was like all before COVID really kicked off, and we were going down the motorway, and Marianne said about the book deal, and then she said a number of a sum of money, and I nearly dropped the phone. And that's the moment that my life completely and utterly changed. It's great to be able to make a living from what I love to do, and it's great for my parents not to be worried about me anymore. Like there's no neighbours or well-meaning people calling my mother offering me civil servants job applications, or or working in the toll booth just to get by. So it's great for them that they know that I'm finally doing what I love and comfortable in it.
Like I have loads of friends that are writing or in the doing books, but it's you're really afraid to ask them about it. So it's great to get the validation, isn't it?
Yeah, and I would have been like that for like more than 10 years. Like I'm 30 now. I say more than 10 years, and everyone's like, so since you were 12? But like my friends from home, they're obviously like interested in the writing or whatever, but they'd be very wary sort of like approaching it, because nobody knows really how it works, and they're nearly afraid to ask, because I always tell them it's going terribly. So it's great that such positive news about it has come out and people are able to celebrate with me. I wasn't expecting that. I was expecting my life to change and for me to feel great.
Yeah.
But the added bonus is that like the community around me feels great, and like even I went down and signed a few books in my local GAA, and all the kids came up. Well, all the kids. One kid came over at halftime to get her mom's book signed, and that absolutely made my year really. So yeah, people have been so great about it.
And you're a camogie player, aren't you?
Yeah.
But I mean, I was talking to you before about this, that you know, that your community, or particularly say the camogie club, they're so proud of you, aren't they?
Yeah, it's really nice. Because like I'm not that great a camogie player, so at least I'm good at something. Like, like I barely made it onto the team. I was cornerback in the end, and I loved it. But I think I was saying it to you before. I don't think I play camogie only. It was for my local team,
Yeah.
you know. And I remember when I started in college, I was like, maybe I'll make friends by joining the camogie team there. And it was just a different sort of thing. It's not like when I'm at home, it's like playing with family. And we've known each other since we were kids. And I've grown up at looking at the older players play and kind of idolising them. And then when you make the same team as them, it's really, really special. And yeah, even Mark, my old babysitter, and she's 4 kids, and she still roasted me in training. So yeah, it's great. And we've new clubhouse opened and new like facilities and stuff. So yeah, I can't wait to get back into the clubhouse.
Exactly.
Like when COVID has gone away, and have a shower.
And when you think like last March, like what a time for it to happen, because it was just as the pandemic happened.
Yeah.
So that must have been a bit surreal then, was it?
Yeah, I think my brother said it. He was like, trust you, like the whole world falls apart and you finally find your feet.
Yeah.
It felt like, yeah, it was seismic. It was a seismic change in my life. And I was kind of lucky in a way that the whole world was going through something big at the same time. So like my outer life or outer reality sort of reflected what was going on internally, in that like I was readjusting to a new normal anyways. And I think it would have been a bit different if life went on as normal for everyone else and I was like trying to scramble and find my feet. It's a great thing to happen, but it's change, you know, and all change is you're kind of awkward and clunky with it. So yeah, I'm still finding my feet, like interviews and stuff.
And I mentioned that week, like you also, with TV film rights were signed as well the same week with Element Pictures, who are, you know, great Irish company, famous obviously with Normal People and Conversations with Friends coming out. So that must have, and Normal People just came out actually around that time.
It was after that actually.
Was
so
it?
I got the deal. So my agent Marion is like the most magical person ever. She's like a really like great businesswoman, but when you meet her, you're just like, you can't be real. She's like a fairy godmother or whatever. And the first time I had coffee with her, I went home. I got a short story published in the newspaper, and she read it, and she was like, will you have coffee with me? And I was like, yeah, grand. And then I kind of Googled her name, and I was like, oh Jesus, she's a big gun. And then I had coffee with her, and I was like, oh gee, you're too good to be true.
Like mention out your father, what he said.
Oh yeah, so I went home, and Dad goes, did you give her any money? And I was like, no. He thought she was a con artist from what I had been saying, like lucky for me she wasn't, because I'm so gullible, I go with anything. But yeah, I would say to people, because a couple of people have come to me like looking for advice around getting agents or whatever. Like I have never given a bob to Marion. Like she makes commission off whatever I sell or whatever, and she does business deals for me which is great because I have no idea how to do them. And then she makes like whatever percentage of that. But I've never spent any money trying to become a writer. I've never. I suppose it's different if you're like self-publishing and stuff.
Yeah.
Then you're going into different territory. But if any agent asks for money off you up front or anything, just run a million miles away.
Yeah. And it was an article. It was a short story, wasn't it? That you won short story competition.
Yeah, I suppose that's kind of where that kind of started the ball rolling for a chain of events that happened. So I did an MA up in Queen's and I loved it. I did English in Trinity first, and I really liked the course, but I was a disaster socially. Like I didn't really have any friends, and I was kind of like wandering around Dublin on my own. And I live on a dairy farm, and I'm only 40 minutes away from the centre of town, but I kind of got a culture shock when I went to Trinity for the first time. And I dropped out and went back again because I loved the course so much. But I didn't really make any friends. And then when I went up to Belfast, I had the experience in that master's. I did a creative writing master's. I hadn't like the experience that I thought I'd have in Trinity, where I found friends for life and like kindred spirits nearly. And then I finished that master's, and I started entering writing competitions, just like the way that you'd enter the lotto, not expecting to win anything. And then I got an email saying that I had won, and I thought it was spam, and then I rang the number and it wasn't spam. And this is before, like, it was my first story that was published, so it was a huge deal for me. And then they put me up in a hotel in Cork, and I got to do a writing workshop, and it was amazing. And then the Irish Times reprinted that, and that's how I found my agent. So that's kind of how it all started. So there was a lot of luck involved for me, I would say.
So she actually saw that Irish Times article.
Yeah.
And the headline, wasn't it, was like...
Oh yeah, it was like so when the story won, I had entered 2 stories, and I was like, which one is it? Because one of them was like a short story that's actually ended up as a chapter in the novel, and another one, The Wake, and the other one was What Feminism Is, and everyone forgets the title because the headline in the Irish Times was Irish Bad Sex Story. And I remember my mum being on the phone to my aunties and being like so proud, and she was like, just Google Louise Nealon and bad sex and you'll find her. And I was like, oh Jesus. But I've been so lucky with my family that they've been just so supportive. Because it's weird having a writer in the family, I'd say, for them.
And like at that stage, how much of the book had you written?
Oh, that's a good question, actually. It's hard to know. I would say about a third of the book was written. So the book was written very slowly over 10 years or so, but it only kind of picked up speed in the last couple of years. So I wrote about 2/3 of it in the last 2 years before it. And to be honest, meeting Marion really encouraged me to keep writing it. I don't think it would have been very easy for me to, if I was any good at any other job, I would have done that.
Yeah.
You know, I really wanted to be a secondary school English teacher because I loved my secondary school English teacher, but I wasn't sure if I would have the discipline, or I wasn't sure that I'd have the authority in the classroom that was needed for to be a teacher. And a lot of my friends were teachers, and they found it quite difficult. And they were like, it's kind of like a vocation. They were like, if you're doing it as a backup plan, that's sort of like not the way to go into things. So writing has always been the thing that I wanted to do, and I tried to do loads of different other things. Like I tried to be a bookseller. I worked in a bookshop, loved it, but I was just reading the books, and when I was putting them out, like I was a disaster. And tried to be a waitress, and I have great respect for people in the service industry because it's hard work and long hours, and I think the skills required to be a good waitress or a good host even, or manager or anything in that field is vastly valued in our society, definitely.
Totally, as someone who I grew up in a bar and I always worked there, and I always said that for getting used to talking to people, all different types of people, and different, learning about them and different stories, and it's a great way, I think, for any writer, for inspiration.
Yeah, absolutely. But like, I was grand at that bit. I got to know people and stuff, and my social skills really developed. But I was so clumsy. Like, I'd be dropping plates and glasses, and the chefs hated me because I always got orders wrong. I nearly set the restaurant on fire because I put a napkin over a candle and then turned around and made an open kitchen. And the chefs were like, "Louise, how do you turn around?" And so I really I was able to develop definitely the social side and looking at the way that people treat you as well.
True.
Or I remember I had one guy whistled at me for a bill once, and I was kind of like, "How do you think you are?" But you can't say anything, obviously. But there's a great film called Life is Beautiful. Have you seen it?
I know it, yeah, brilliant.
And the guy at the start, he's a waiter. And the advice that his dad, I think it's his dad or his uncle, an older member of the family anyway, gives him is that to be a waiter you kind of have to be a sunflower. So you have to stand up straight and never bow too much, because like you're not a slave. You're not a slave to anybody. You're the authority there.
True.
And
your English teacher, what is her name? Because the last time you were on the podcast, I didn't ask you.
Sarah Butler is her name, and she's a writer as well. And she's the first writer that I came across in real life. So she's been a massive inspiration. And when I left school and dropped out of college, actually, she got my number and invited me for coffee. We ended up having lunch, and that was like the hand of God reaching out for me, because I felt really lost. And she was incredible. She didn't know at the time how much she helped me. She does now. Because I mention her in every interview.
Which is great. I think that's brilliant. Because I don't think quite often teachers, it's good that they hear that, because they don't know the influence that they have on people, for good or bad,
And they really do.
Yeah, and the good teachers particularly, you know.
Yeah, but even my friends who didn't do English in college or had no real interest in reading, they got stuff out of her class as well, and they got a love of reading out of her class. So yeah, it's really stuck with us.
And you told me before a great one, which I thought was brilliant, and every teacher should do, is she would teach you a party trick.
Yeah, so one of the things that she did, she can't even remember this. One of the things she did was we had to learn a poem for class, and she was like, if you leave my class with anything, you need a party trick, especially if you can't sing or tell a joke, recite a poem. And I still have a Michael Longley poem that I learned off air, and it's incredible. Don't ask me to say it. I'll forget it.
Yeah, exactly. So for the writing process then, when you were actually writing the book, what's your inspiration? Is it, do you go into a room and lock yourself in every day or for hours, or what do you do? How does that work?
Yeah, I remember when my grandma was still alive, she lived beside us, and because we lived in the family home, and she lived in, her house was adjoined to ours. And I remember going into her and explaining I'd won a writing retreat with that prize in Cork, actually. It's an amazing prize. It's called the Sean O'Phelan Short Story Competition. And everyone should enter. That and Frances McManus as well.
Okay.
And the Moth magazine has a great competition as well. But I got a writing retreat out of that, and I was trying to explain to her what it was. So I was like, so I'm going away, and someone's going to cook for me, and it's in really peaceful surroundings or whatever. She was like, yeah, but you have all that here. She was like, why would you be going to West Cork for that? And she has a point, because I'm really lucky with my family situation. So I grew up on a farm, and so I was never short of work. If I was out of work, I do a few milkings. I'm by no means a dairy maid, and my brother does the Trojan work of the farm, and I never give him the credit that he deserves in interviews, so I have to say that. But I was mostly in my room, in my childhood bedroom, Mum be making me dinners. I'd make my own tea and coffee now. But I was just really lucky, and like I didn't have much money, and I didn't really have much financial freedom, but there was always home.
Yeah.
And I say in the acknowledgements to the book that I had to go home to write the novel, and I really did. If I was working in Belfast, I wouldn't have written it.
True.
So yeah, the countryside really helped. It wasn't a case of locking myself into a room for hours on end.
Like, I always hear writers talking about, getting up at 5 a.m. and
Absolutely
knocking
not.
out
No.
2,000 words.
My sister
And it
laughs.
scares everyone, I think.
Yeah, my sister laughs at me because I'm talking really seriously about my writing process. And she's like, Louise, all you do is nap and cry. And I really do. I have loads of naps. Go for a walk, play with my little niece Sophie. If I do an hour, a good hour of writing, and it's amazing how much you can get done in an hour. And it makes me sound very lazy because other people have like 9-to-5 jobs or whatever. But my excuse is that writing it's quite there's emotional work involved in it.
Nice.
And there's stuff that I do around writing that is crucial to it. Like, it sounds really selfish, but like I do like yoga in the morning. I do a bit of writing, go for a walk, and the routine changes every day. But really, and there's a lot of like pottering around on the internet,
Of course.
But if I set my alarm for an hour every day and do a good hour, that really works for me. And
I heard a great one with Kevin Barry interview recently, and he was saying that he's a shed and he goes out to his shed, but he said he could be sitting there for hours and he's like a little rubber ball and he's just bouncing it off the wall, and he said he might do 20 minutes, but he goes out every day and spends the hours there.
You need to be there.
Waiting, yeah. And that's what you say getting the deal does, isn't it? It gives you the space to be able to do that.
Yeah, but it still feels really surreal, and I just feel incredibly lucky. I feel like someone's going to tap me on the shoulder every time someone rings me. I look at the phone and I'm like, oh, this is someone saying it's all up now. The game is up. I have to go back and milk cows.
I was actually wondering, because every time I write something about you, I always call you the novelist Louise Nealon, and I'm wondering, do you read that and go, God,
Oh,
that seems strange.
Yeah, I don't really read things about me. Because I started reading Goodreads reviews before the book came out, and some of them were really, really nice, and some of them were like awful. And my sisters were kind of like, yeah, it's not good for your mental health to be like Googling your name every day. And there was a time where like I'd get up from bed, do a couple of interviews, and then I'd be like, the adrenaline would go and then I'd completely crash. So that was like my day, and that's not really healthy, and you kind of have to do it for a couple of weeks. But it's great doing stuff like this because it's not like, it's kind of like a little holiday as well. You get to come down and
I know.
And spend time in a place. So I feel really, really lucky.
And you talked before about writing. You say when you're moving or swimming, sea swimming as well.
Yeah.
Do you that's where you get inspiration? Is that right?
Yeah, inspiration comes from everywhere, really.
Does it?
If I'm trying to find inspiration, I won't find it. That's when it eludes you. But we talked about people watching and stuff.
Yeah.
My dad is he's an awful person to go to a restaurant with. I mean, he's a great person to go to a restaurant with. He's a lovely man. But when we go for family dinners, he's always looking around at other tables and seeing what other people are doing. It's just pure nosiness. And my sister has it as well, and I don't. And you were saying that's...
I was amazed when you said that.
Yeah, and you say that you look around as well.
All the time.
Yeah.
And also, I just read a quote there about a week ago, Bono saying that an artist is a person that looks at the other table.
Yeah, so. Absolutely not. I'm looking at my food.
Yeah.
But there's but then that makes me question. I'm like, oh, am I a real writer then, or am I a real artist? And I used to like read. I remember reading Stephen King's On Writing book, and he said to be a writer you need to write 1,500 words a day, and like that is a phenomenal amount of words for me. If I get 200 words out a day, I'm like, this is great. But I was so impressionable back then. I was like an adviceaholic around writing. I was like, anyone, give me advice, anyone. Because it's a profession that like I knew nothing about, and it's so hard to have any sort of structure on it. You kind of have to make up your own. So I was just trying to adapt any person. So I was like, Stephen King, I'm going to write 1,500 words a day. And I couldn't. No matter how hard I tried, I couldn't. So then I thought, okay, I'm not a writer then, or I'm a failure. But like, yeah, like growing up, it kind of gives me a perspective of like, that's not the way that I do it. And maybe if I say that, it'll give other people the freedom or the license to be like, oh, okay, like she's not a nosy person at a restaurant, and she still writes. So
exactly.
I find it really, I have to cut myself off from people a lot. I find other people, like, it's nearly too much when I'm watching other people.
But I think it's great that you're saying that, because I do think that line about 2,000 words a day like scares the life out of people.
Yeah.
And everybody's different,
Yeah.
like how they write, And when you're writing, do you edit it loads of times, or how does that work? When you write, just say you write a bit, do you keep editing and changing it, or how's that?
Yeah, that's interesting. I don't notice myself editing. I think Dermot Healy's amazing.
He's a big influence of you, isn't he?
Yeah, he wrote A Goat Song. It's probably my favourite novel, my favourite Irish novel anyways. And he has a great analogy of building a stone wall in Connemara, and it's really slow, and you're not sure which rocks sit right together, and you take out the rock and you put another one in. And it's quite meditative and a bit boring, and the weather's sometimes awful, but you keep going, and as long as you keep going, the wall's going to be built. And I like that analogy, because it sees writing as kind of like an organic thing. It's not something mechanical, and like you're working with stuff that you can't really shape, like in the same way like that some stones won't fit together, like some characters or scenes won't sit right, and so you're like, okay, so I'm going to have to like reshuffle that around, and yeah, I enjoy editing and going back over it, but I don't have a structure of, okay, I'm just going to write this now, and sometimes I write 800 words without editing, and then I go back, especially if it's like a conversation or a scene. I was like, I'll just get it done, and then I'll go back. And sometimes I write 2 sentences, and I work on them again and again and again until they seem right in my head.
And actually, now that I have you here, just another question I've always wanted to ask a writer is, if you're doing a book, do you start and go to, I often hear them going about the writing and they don't know what's going to happen next, or do you write bits and pieces and then put it all together, in different sections of the book?
Yeah, so yeah, when I was writing, I call them scenes. They're not chapters. I call them like different scenes of the book. I had in my head, okay, that's coming after this, but like the stone wall, it shifts.
Yeah.
So I had Debbie in Snowflake. I had Debbie going to college in the middle of the book, and it was only quite late in the process that I realised, no, in order for this story to work, I needed to tell the caravan story first, and then the next chapter is her starting college, and so those 2 threads run side by side, rather than home life and then college life, which I had for ages. But the great thing about that is, like, you're the first reader of the story, so it's great when stuff like that happens, and you're like, oh, this is different, and this sparks, and it's a great feeling when you're editing and suddenly something works, and you can have that feeling, and then the day after be like, oh no. Like there's so many times where I was like, oh yeah, like I had an idea where Debbie was writing Xanthi letters all the time, and that was the way the story was going to be published. And for about a week, I was really high and my poor friends got emails from me being like, and this is why it works so well, and blah blah blah. And then the next week, I was like, no, back to the drawing board.
How does that work then? Say with your editor, does your editor give you advice then about that, or how does that work?
So I worked with Margaret Steed, my editor. She was really amazing. But by the time I got the manuscript to Manila Press, my publishers, it was kind of like Marion put me in touch with an editor who worked on it with me before sending it out on submission.
Okay.
And can't remember what his name was, but he was lovely. Daniel Bulger, I think his name was. He was really, really encouraging, and he was brilliant. And then by the time it got to Margaret, she kind of saw it as, okay, there's some things that we need to do, but I think it's nearly there. And I was reluctant to let it go. I was kind of like, no, there's lots to change. It's not.
So I go sometimes. I sense from you that you don't get offended if suggested changes. You actually like that. You like to.
Oh yeah. If it makes the story better, like go. And I have a sense now that which is why I don't read stuff about the story anymore. I kind of have nothing to do with it now.
Yeah.
It's out on its own. And I had great fun with the characters, but it's like I am not my book, and I'm not if a critique of the book is someone's opinion, and when you sit down and you open a book, it's nothing to do with the author. I write so that the book exists separate to me.
Exactly.
So you can't. I look at the book and I can see so many flaws in it.
So it's not you that they're critiquing; it's the book.
Oh yeah, which is completely fair enough. Yeah. And the reader finishes the book as well, so it belongs to them. The book doesn't belong to me; it belongs to the reader and what experiences they bring to it, and what they make of the characters. And I remember, in college, I started reading Middlemarch by George Eliot, and I was like, I don't know why everyone loves this. And then I think about 2 years later I read it and I was like, oh my God. And it was because I had come to that period of my life that I needed. I needed that book at that moment.
I get you. And so your deal is a 2-book deal. So do you think you've learned an awful lot from that process?
I
for the next one?
definitely think so. I hope so.
Yeah.
I don't want to be sitting here being oh yeah, it's going to take another 10 years. But yeah, I've given myself the summer off to enjoy the process of the book being published and stuff. But I had a chat with my editor, Margaret Steed, about the second book. I'm excited about it, and I think something that I've learned from writing the first book is that it's not helpful in any way for me to doubt myself or for me to have anxiety over something that's not yet written. So I know that when I start writing the second book, it won't come out as a fully formed book. It won't be perfect. And it's going to take a lot of work to make it readable and good, or because people think that books just happen by magic, but they don't.
Of course.
There's so much work and craft that goes into it.
And actually, could you just give us a quick 30 seconds, just for people that haven't read it yet and are listening, 30-second synopsis of the book, of Snowflake?
Yeah, so Snowflake is a story about an 18-year-old called Debbie, and she lives on a rural farm in Kildare in Ireland, like me. And she goes to Trinity, like me. But where she differs, when me and Debbie differ, is that she has a different family than I do. So she's an only child. She doesn't know who her dad is. But she is good friends with her Uncle Billy, who lives in a caravan at the back of their house. And her mother Maeve is really interested in dreams, and everyone in the village thinks that Maeve has kind of a screw loose, and she's kind of like the local joke nearly. And Debbie has quite a strained relationship with her mum because her mum thinks that she's passed on a dreaming ability to Debbie. She thinks that she can dream other people's dreams. Whereas Billy assures Debbie that that's nonsense, and to go to university and kind of like make something of herself in order to escape the same fate as her mother. But when Debbie goes to college, she finds it really difficult. Like her experience in the city is very alienating, but she finds a friend called Xanthi, and Xanthi kind of tries to help her navigate her new life. So that's the book.
And like your main character is Debbie, who works or lives in a farm and goes to Trinity like yourself.
Yeah.
And then there's the mother, Maeve. And I've heard you saying that you actually feel closer to the mother. People might think that it's Debbie, but you actually feel closer.
Yeah.
Is that because of the nettles and going out to the...
I don't dance in the nettles naked. Maeve is kind of like a pariah in the book, and people... I find it really interesting. It's great to have readers, finally, and spending like 10 years like alone with them, and like it's kind of like introducing your invisible friends to people. And everyone loves Billy, and Billy's really charming and funny, and everyone's like, yeah, Maeve's a bit mad though, isn't she? And I'm always like, yeah, she is. But I also think that there's a lot of Maeve in all of us.
Of course, yeah.
And Maeve is kind of like she doesn't get a lot of lines in the book, and I find her really difficult to write, because she originated in my head as a projection of how I could end up if my mental health wasn't addressed. So I was really obsessed with dreams in my 20s, and the idea for the books spawned from that. But in order for the book to work as a story, I had to kind of give Maeve that obsession and kind of like contain it within her. So yeah, I think that's why I feel close to her. And her bedroom, the tabernacle, is my bedroom's very similar to hers in that it has loads of quotes on the wall and postcards and stuff. And I have a very soft spot for her.
And Billy, everyone who reads the book, I think, really likes. He's a real character.
Yeah.
And it was interesting. I remember you saying in an interview that you based him on Tommy Tiernan, or roughly based him on Tommy Tiernan.
Yeah. So, I can't believe I said that. I was as a teenager, I was a big fan of Tommy Tiernan's stand-up, and I'd be rolling around the floor laughing at him. But what struck me was I really wanted to be his friend, but you can't be a friend, like a 15-year-old girl can't be a friend with like a middle-aged man or whatever. So that's where the character of Billy came. And it started off as conversations between Billy and it was another girl. It wasn't Debbie, I forget her name. But it was basically me having conversations with Tommy Tiernan, who I imagined Tommy Tiernan to be, but I called him Billy. And then, as with all characters, Billy kind of like took on a life of his own. And I'd say, like, I sent Tommy Tiernan the book, and I'd say if he reads it, he wouldn't really recognize himself in he wouldn't recognize himself in Billy.
Yeah.
But that's where the inspiration came from.
And like Ireland's tiny, so the question I want to ask you is like, you sent him the book. Did he get it? Do you know? Did he?
He did. So he sent me a message on Twitter. I remember checking my Twitter notifications. I had one notification, one message. And I was like, oh, lovely. So I looked at the notification and I was like, Tommy Tiernan followed you on Twitter, and nearly lost my life. And then I looked at the message and it was Tommy Tiernan, and he was like, oh Jesus, do you mind if I give you a call and we'll have a chat or whatever? And I nearly dropped the phone, and then I went home and everyone's like, no, it can't be him, and his account isn't verified on Twitter. So like we were taking bets to see like who it was, and then he rang me. I woke up to a missed call from him, a classic. I was asleep, and I rang him back, and And he answered, and we had a lovely, lovely chat about books, about Dermot Healy and John Moriarty, and he didn't get the book. My publisher sent him a book, and I was like, give us like your postcode or whatever. He was like, just send it to Tommy Tiernan, like he's going to get here.
Tommy Tiernan in Galway.
Yeah. I'd say he just didn't want me.
And what was that like on the phone? What was it a bit like being on his TV show?
Absolutely.
Like I know him from, I have a comedy club, so he does it regularly, and I always say that anytime I talk to him, like he gets more information out of you than anybody else.
Yeah, he's one of those people you just want to tell your whole life story to. I remember a couple of times on the phone he was like, I'm not following you, because it was like confession.
Exactly.
I was like, I need to tell you everything. But he's a lovely way about him. He gives you a lot of space. This is from one phone call now. But it was exactly like hearing him on a podcast, only you're able to talk back to him, which was very fun.
Surreal too, I'd say.
Oh yeah, and then I went downstairs. I was in bed, and then I went downstairs, and I was like, I just came off the phone to Tommy Tiernan, and I was like, what?
So the book, you talk about obviously the character Debbie goes to college and with your mother, but mental health is a big issue or a big topic. And I saw a line today actually, it was like, you said, I'm trying to get at a psychological realism. So that was a really interesting phrase. Like it's very important to you, isn't it?
Yeah, I suppose like in interviews and talking about the book, one of the big reasons why I wrote the book was because I wanted to give it to my 18-year-old self. I wanted to give a story to my teenage self going to college, who was terrified and a bit lost. I kind of wanted to represent that, and also for her to see herself in it. And I think I've done that, and that's like, I know the flaws with the story and the craft. Obviously, it's my first novel, but I'm incredibly proud of myself for representing that like young woman or whatever.
But it's not just for the young, like just say for people who are reading your book. I think it's also for parents of maybe people that are going to college, because they can maybe have a better understanding of the issues that they're going through.
And it's funny when I talk to people about the book, they're like, "Is it a young adult book?" And I'm like, "No, I don't think so." Like,
no.
But it's funny how people like want to categorize it or like box it off into something that they know, and it's something about our generation or our society now that if you write about teenagers, it's a story for teenagers. Whereas like, I don't know, Portrait of an Artist as a Young Man, James Joyce, that was about a very young man, and that wasn't YA, YA didn't exist at the time.
Exactly. Like actually when I was doing the little bio for this talk, I said, it's for people that who are about to make that journey or who already have.
Yeah.
So, because that's the thing, a lot of people have that experience of going to college, and it's such a dramatic thing in people's lives, isn't it?
And it's lovely to get messages from people. That's the nicest thing actually, from people who have read the book. And I remember one lady messaged me on Twitter, and she said, I went to Trinity like 20 years ago now, and that scene with Debbie she's in the toilet cubicle, and she's looking at the graffiti on the wall, and she was like, that was me 20 years ago. And she was like, only we were allowed to smoke back then, so I was smoking in the toilet cubicle as well. And it's not just a Trinity thing. There was people from like UCC and NUIG, and they're like, that was me in college. That was like, because you go from being a big fish in a small fish in a big fish, small pond, and then it's complete fish out of water experience, especially for Irish people.
And even we're a tiny country, but going, and as you say, you're only like 40 minutes from Trinity, but it's a big change, isn't it?
A big shift.
Yeah.
Even in your, it's
like between the country and Dublin.
And the city. Yeah, absolutely. And like I knew all of my neighbours and do you know the way like when you're driving around, tip, like you like give people like a finger signal, like And I'd always like, even when we go for a walk along the canal, you'd be always saying hello to people, even if you don't know them, because I'm always afraid that like I'm supposed to know them. Whereas in Dublin, I was going around saying hello to everybody. And I think Brazzy said this on a podcast as well. He's like, he did the same thing in London. I was like, that's even worse, saying hello to people in London. But for me, Dublin was my London. I was just so, and the city people didn't really understand it because that was their turf, you know, and so many people in Trinity come from the city. So. And
you wrote a great article there about a month ago in the Irish Independent, and you kind of talked about that time when you were in college and, you know, going to the doctor. And I thought that was amazing because, you know, it gave a perspective about mental health that people don't talk about enough, I think, at the moment.
Yeah,
you know.
And it's great that we're talking about mental health now. It's in a very, it's like a hot topic and people are very enthusiastic to talk about it. But we really don't know what we're talking about. Even when you say the words mental health, they don't really sit right with me.
I know.
It's nearly like too polite a term. Because I think everyone knows someone who's died by suicide, you know?
Exactly.
And suicide is like the extreme result of mental illness. But I also think we don't, there's levels of mental illness, and I think if you can, I used to think that being miserable was normal. And I think a lot of like young people do think that, especially if you're coming to, like into yourself as an adult, being like, okay, I'll just get a job now. Like life is going to be grey and boring, and it need to get a 9-to-5 job and security. And what I like want to really advocate for is that like you are in charge of your own life. You're in charge of your own happiness, and life is as beautiful as you make it. And I really want to like empower people to really just like live life creatively. You don't have to be a creative person in order to make your life beautiful. But yeah, I think with mental illness and our society like labeling people, that's a dangerous thing to do because everyone has a responsibility to look after themselves and also to look after others and just be compassionate.
But I think, but also, you know, I've heard you say before that, you know, the people who probably need help the most are the ones that don't realise it, you know, or getting help is so important.
Yeah, because I was lucky because I suppose I was interested in it. I was interested in psychology, and when finally I got a diagnosis after like, I think it took 4 years maybe of going to the doctor with I used to get a lot of colds, a lot of viruses, and obviously your physical health is going to be impacted if your mental health is poor. And I remember getting a diagnosis finally of depression and anxiety, but that only happened when I couldn't sleep one night and I went into my mum and dad's room, and I told them like I couldn't imagine living anymore. And I wasn't suicidal, I just was really afraid. I was afraid that I'd be at home for the rest of my life and completely paralysed, and I was afraid that the writing would never work out, and I was afraid of everything really. And it was only then that my dad actually went to his GP and told him that he was worried about me, and his GP said, bring her down to me, and he spoke to me, and that was the first human connection that I had in the medical or psychiatric profession. I remember he made me laugh, and
he talked about horses and
racing. Yeah, and racing, and I hated horses and racing. But seeing how much he loved it, I was like, oh, like that like, fair play to you. And then he kind of like encouraged me to like find like my own draw and passions and stuff.
I really liked that what he did, because at the time I think you were finding it difficult to write.
Yeah.
But he recommended you to read a book, didn't he?
Marion Keys.
Who's now on the front cover of your book, That's amazing, isn't it?
And it was a Christmas Day when she gave me the blurb for the book.
Was it?
Christmas Day, and I couldn't believe it. It was like all my Christmases.
Does she know that story, I wonder?
Yeah,
she does.
Oh, I told her.
Because it's brilliant. I mean,
Yeah.
it shows you the power of good. You know, I've actually seen you say that literature helps you. You know?
Absolutely, yeah. I remember a pre-interview for one of the interviews. The researcher was like, "Okay, so what's your book about?" And I was like, I told him, I gave him the spiel, and then he was like, "Yeah, and you said that books saved your life. What's that about?" And I was kind of like, "Okay, I'll just go straight into it."
How much time do we have?
And I was like, "Well, they're bulletproof." And yeah, well, books provided like a real essential connection to me at a time where I was really lonely. So one of my favourite books is Just Kids by Patti Smith. And it's my desert island book because she's someone that it sounds silly, but I made friends with her when I read that book. And that's something magical that books can do. You can see a person's soul, you know, on the page, especially because it's her memoir and she's talking about her relationship with Robert Mapplethorpe, who's a photographer, and they just went to New York when they were kids and fell in love, and then they realised that he was gay, and so they became like best friends. And reading that book showed me how to be a better friend to people, and that's something that like a lot of people say they read books for entertainment or something to bring in their holidays, or just to laugh or escape, and books aren't an escape for me. They're a connection to real life, and I've met so many people through the pages of books, that like people who are alive and people who are dead, that like mean so much to me. Yeah.
And like, I know you love Joni Mitchell as well, in her own words.
Yeah.
And in that book, like, she talks about her sixth sense. She kind of says her five senses are on fire, and her sixth sense. She kind of said that because she had depression when she was younger, but she felt like that helped her with her writing. She said it was important.
Yeah, that was. I loved what she said about that, because like there's a power in that vulnerability. And there's so many people who ask if there's a connection between art and what we now call mental illness or depression or whatever. But she says in that book as well that if you get treatment for depression and you're just put on drugs, then you're still going to be just an asshole on drugs. And she was like, she was like, the reason I had depression was because there was some sort of spiritual unease within me, and I had to go into myself to kind of work on that. And I think that's what she means, like when I say that writing is emotional work, that's really what I mean. You kind of have to work on, you're figuring out questions all the time because nobody knows anything.
True.
Really.
Like, she had a great line. She said, "You're drawing on the toxicity inside of you."
Yeah.
You know, so it's draining then. You know.
Yeah, and there's good and bad in everyone. You know.
But do you think that's part? Like, do you need? You know, like people say, like, particularly for songs, you know, that it's when you're sad that you're more inspired. Do you believe that or not?
Oh, I think struggle makes great art. When I was sad or depressed, I wasn't writing. I find it very difficult. I find it really difficult even to read. But going through an emotional struggle, like that's why there's so many songs about breakups. You know, people like eating loads of ice cream and then getting the guitar out, and it's kind of like it's a power thing. It's reclaiming your experience. And that was definitely the same for me. Like I struggled in college, and this novel is me sort of reclaiming that experience.
Exactly.
And reclaiming my own experiences of finding it difficult to navigate life in all of the characters, not just Debbie.
Exactly.
And those characters, they taught me loads that I didn't know before. So.
And I think you really got that across. I mean, that was your plan, and you definitely achieved that.
Thanks.
So the last question that I'm going to ask you, because I always ask everyone, as you know, like the last time you were on, I asked you for your happy place, and it was Inisheer at that time, which is a very special place. And actually, that's how I discovered you, was an amazing short story that you wrote about Inisheer. I feel like, a guy who discovers a band before their demo comes out. That was me. So my last question then is, if you close your eyes and take 4 deep breaths, where is your other happy place and why?
Okay. My other happy place is very near where I live. It's about a kilometre down the road, and it's a hill. It's a hill that looks into the valley of Newtown, and Kappa, our local GAA, its new clubhouse is there. The steeple of the church is like the main feature of that view. We call it Marion's Hill because Marion lives at the top of it. But the reason it's my happy place, it's a gorgeous view. And the church is there, and the school that I went to primary school in. But the reason it's my happy place is because it's where I imagine Debbie and Maeve and Billy live. Now there's no house at the bottom of the hill, but in my imagination there is. And I pass by it nearly every day, either going for a run or a walk. And it's really magical to think that I imagine them down there, and that landscape gave me so much material for the book. And every time that I look down there, I feel really proud of my home place and where I've come from, and also proud that the landscape has given me so much as well and enriched my life. So every time I look down there, I just feel an enormous sense of gratitude and home, both off the page and on the page as well.
Thank you so much, Louise, for bringing such a gorgeous book into the world and for doing the interview today.
I would ask if you could please subscribe to Apple Podcast so a new episode will appear in your library every week. I would also really appreciate if you could leave a rating and a review, as it helps others to discover this podcast. To find out who's on every Tuesday, please follow me on Instagram and Facebook at Travel Tales with Fergal.
Stay safe and keep dreaming of future travels.
Travel Tales with Fergal.